have the biggest responsibility of being the last panel before we get to the beer, which is a dangerous situation. Mainly just for me, because I do love to drink a nice cold beer. So happy to welcome executives from ATAC Resources, Granite Creek Copper, and CAVU Mining. Gentlemen, I will go down the line here and let you do your own formal introductions with the projects and what you're looking to do this drill program, or this exploration season, excuse me.
Thank you. So CAVU Mining is a copper explorer. We're focused on porphyry copper in Western Canada. We listed on the CSE in 2021, February, trading under the ticker CAVU. And we acquired our Hopper project shortly after. It's a multi-target porphyry with peripheral skarn mineralization. We believe that the porphyry hasn't really seen as much interest from past operators as we think it warrants. We drilled that last year, hit a propylitic zone, 0.2% copper over 100 meters that we're working on expanding this year, trying to vector to the core. We currently have a drill turning on the project. It's fully road accessible. We also just closed a big transaction and acquired the Star project in BC. This is a project southwest of Dease Lake. It is a mineralized alkalic copper gold porphyry, mineralized to 700 meters depth. Proven by drilling, and it was stuck in an onerous joint venture, 49-51% holding, and we now have a path to owning 100% of that asset. So that's us. Drill's currently turning, and we expect first results to come out in the next couple months.
Hi, my name is Tim Johnson. I'm President and CEO of Granite Creek Copper. Our project is the Carmax project located in central Yukon. Very good infrastructure for the project. We're a road access project. We're within 20 kilometers of grid power on the Yukon grid. That's hydroelectric power. We did our first major drill campaign on the project we did last year, culminating in a 43% increase in the contained metal measured and indicated. So we released that updated resource estimate middle of March, and then just a few days ago we announced that we are now updating our preliminary economic assessment. So we expect that by the end of the year. Now this is an update, so we're taking a previous one that was published in 2017 that looked at processing roughly 11 million tons of high-grade oxide, and we're adding all the resources that we have. So we're now sitting on 36 million tons, grading just over % copper equivalent, both oxide and sulfide. So this new PEA will address not only oxide mineralization, but the sulfide mineralization as well. Our goal is to get the project into the 15 to 20 year mine life before advancing it further. That's about it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. My name is Graham Downs, President and CEO of ATAC Resources. We have 3 projects in the Yukon and 1 in BC. Many of you might know the Rakla Gold Project. It's in central Yukon. It has the Tiger deposit at the western end, which is about 460,000 ounces at just over 3 grams. And we have Canada's only Carlin-style mineralization with a resource out at the Nataline, the Osiris resource, which is about 1.7 million ounces at just over 4 grams. So we'll be back out working on the Nataline project this year with 2,000 meters drilling. That's just started up. Well, the crews just went in there today. And then we have the Connaught project, which is in western Yukon on a road near Dawson City. It's a copper porphyry target. We've had that project for almost 20 years, but we've been so focused on the Rakla that we're just getting back to it now. It's never been explored for the copper potential there. There's 2 very large anomalies. We'll be doing 5,000 meters drilling there. We're seeing surface results very similar to the Casino deposit, and it's never been drilled. So that's very exciting. That drilling will start in July. And then we've picked up the Pill property, which is in the Golden Horseshoe in the Toodoggone area, and it's right smack in the middle between A-Mark, Freeport, Benchmark, Lawyers, and Thesis. So very nice target there. This is a copper gold porphyry that's we optioned off of Finley Minerals, and we'll be doing a lot of work there as well. We have $9 million in cash, and lots of drilling this year, so it should be pretty exciting.
Thank you, gentlemen. If anybody out in attendance has any questions, feel free to raise your hand anytime. This is informal, so I should be able to see and we can get your questions asked. Gentlemen, I think the similar theme here with the three companies really comes back to copper. And I'd like to kind of work on this a little bit. Obviously, I don't need to tell everybody that there's been quite a bit of volatility in the markets generally all around here lately. But the fundamentals for copper continue to remain strong. I'm in the firm belief that we are in a multi-generational bull market for base metals. There's going to be times of extreme volatility within there. This probably won't be the first time we see this within the greater bull market for copper. But I do want to ask you about providing more supply into a growing demand and timelines to go from early exploration projects such as yours and getting them to a point to where eventually maybe they can actually provide more supply as a mine. What does, talk about the Yukon and what the Yukon can do to provide that supply, and what does, administration and governmental powers that be, how can they continue to help you through that permitting process to be kind of a beacon of copper supply? I know that's a loaded question, but there's a lot in there. Jeb, you want to take first?
Yeah, I think, I totally agree with you. The macro fundamentals for copper are fantastic, I think. The green transition isn't going anywhere. The transition may slow down or increase, but at the same time, there's decades of investment in the supply of copper. And so there are not a lot of developed projects to fill the looming gap in the next few years, I think. And we're in a historically tight market already for the commodity. Regarding the permitting, so we actually just went through the process of permitting for advanced exploration. We are permitted for trail building, road building, drilling with up to 3 drills on the project. And that I think the Yukon has a fairly transparent system that they use for the permitting for that exploration, and that by keeping that transparent, I think you'll be able to, or they will be able to keep generating investment in their metal endowment. So it's timelines have changed somewhat, I think, compared to what they were a few years back, just because of how hot the industry is. There's more permits trying to go through the system, and maybe the capacity isn't always there to review those, depending on where the projects are. But overall, I think the Yukon does a great job compared to other jurisdictions in that sense. So hats off.
Yeah, I can echo some of those comments. I think if there is a point that needs to be worked on, is capacity within government and First Nations to be able to address the permit applications that we're putting forward. I don't think it's not that it's difficult to permit in the Yukon. It just takes longer because they just don't have the capacity. And part of that is as the industry ramps up. I mean, it's hard to find workers in every part of it, and the same is in the permitting thing. And I think what you need to realize about, especially a base metal project, is that one of the reasons I mentioned I wanted to get our project to the 15 to 20 year mine life. When you're in the base metal space, you need a project that has that long life that can survive the cycles, right? If you have a project and you try to get it, you try to short any shortcuts and get it to production fast, you might not have that long life that's going to get you through. And at the end of the day, that looks bad on everybody, because you got a project that fails because it didn't survive the downturn and then the upturn back on the other side.
I think the capacity in the Yukon government is a big issue. I completely agree with that. They're also working on legislation and working to streamline the permitting as well. That's a really big piece to that. It always takes longer than anybody really wants, or proponents want. But I think they have the right idea. I think we just need to encourage them to get that moving along. Another thing about the copper space too, and I think is the government can communicate to the Yukon citizens that they could be leaders in bringing the green revolution and getting everybody on side and to support these projects, because the world's getting smaller and projects are tough, and the Yukon's a great place to be able to do this, and having the regulatory processes we have in Canada and the Yukon is important. And I think the communication piece combined with getting everybody on board and some of the great copper projects in the Yukon can be a leader, and I think the government needs to get that word out a little bit more.
I had the opportunity to sit down with the Honorable Ranch Pillay earlier today, and I actually asked him about it. He was mentioning the government, along with the territory and the federal government and the First Nations, were working in tandem to modernize the permitting process. And I had mentioned to him, it's wonderful to hear, but it's also government. So there's got to be a delivery. It's got to deliver. What does that timeline look like? And as explorers, do you feel like you need a timeline in this sort of instance, or obviously sooner would be better, but you also have to do it right, and you have to do it right the first time. So you can't, you got to do everything possible to do it right the first time, which takes more time. But what kind of lead time do explorers in the Yukon need for such a modernization?
I think if you want, I'll just say one thing is that, I think every junior mining company explorer wants to do the right thing and do it right. We all do. And I think that's a place where the government can come in and foster that collaboration. And it's super critical. I mean, we're a bit earlier stage than maybe you, but that's where the government can come in. And if you do everything right from the beginning, and the government can help foster the goodwill that we're trying to do through that permitting process, through the life cycle of taking something through an exploration stage to a developed mine, the government can play a huge role in that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is I won't say no matter what the timeline, but with reasonable timelines is transparency and consistency. So when I go to do the process now, I know that this process, what the process is, how to do it, and if the rules are going to change, the government need to understand that there is going to be consequences for changing the rules. You can't just take projects away from people, or you can't make projects unpermittable for whatever reason. And if you do, the industry will, they will tell you absolutely in no uncertain terms. So I think for us, that consistency, that's transparency for us to understand what steps we need to take in order to achieve our end goal, which is extraction of the resource.
I do want to kind of go. Let's discuss a little bit about market volatility. Mutual friend of all of ours out of the Yukon told me a couple of weeks ago that the market will tell you how fast or how slow the market wants you to go. Obviously, there's quite a bit of volatility right now. And again, it doesn't take away from the general bull trend that the world needs more copper, needs more metal. But as explorers in times like these, and I know most of you have been through cycles like these before, what does an exploration company need to do to make sure they can weather this type of storm? And how do you communicate that with investors?
Yeah, I think it's really about, in this case, where a lot of companies are going down on low volume and are looking to perhaps raise money for their exploration in progress or their coming exploration for the year. It's really about finding a balance between moving your projects forward fundamentally, while at the same time making sure that you don't dilute your existing shareholder base. And that's really, that is a function of the markets for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for us, it's a trade-off between further exploration and resource expansion versus feasibility on the existing resource. So if markets are tough, you kind of pull in a little bit, you go a little bit more desktop, and you look at for us, we're looking at completing the PEA, and maybe we're going to do less exploring this year because we think we've got the resources to the stage that we can make that step. For us, not that I wouldn't want the success, but success at the end of the drill bit next time will have us questioning a throughput on a proposed mill. So do we take it from 5,000 to 10,000? And that's a huge leap. In the meantime, can we get what we have to the economic phase that's going to attract attention that we need to be able to move it to the next phase? So those are the trade-offs you do. Do you do another 10,000 meters drilling, or do you complete your PEA? And sometimes in this market, maybe you can't do both, whereas in other markets, you might run those in parallel.
I think what's worked for us over the years is we've always had kind of a baseline of about 5 million in the till. So it's always being able to have next year's money. For example, we've got 9 million now. we're going to do 7,000 meters, but we know that we can survive next year. So we have a 2-year window where there's typically always an opportunity to top up. And it's always a balance, and we struggle with it all the time. What are we going to do this year? What allocations are we going to do? But at the same time, investors want drilling. In our case, that's where we're at, and that's what's going to move the needle. And that's what we do, and that's the business we're in. So, investors, we just raised $4 million. We want you to drill the Pill. We want you to drill the Connaught project and do your plan. We have to execute it. But we've always just been able to have next year's money in the till.
What about the importance of strategic partnerships or joint ventures with the big company producers? I keep on thinking back to Rio Tinto coming in with a healthy chunk of cash with Casino and Western Copper and Gold. Newmont's coming in and decide that they are going to continue to develop the Coffee project. We had a conversation this morning with White Gold, obviously Kinross and Agnico, or continue to work with them. But with earlier exploration, I mean, where is the bandwidth from the majors to come in on real early exploration type work as a fundamental strategic partners or JV? Because that will also keep you afloat during volatile times.
Yeah, what we're noticing is that major companies are very interested in reviewing early stage projects much more so than they might have been a few years ago, and that so they clearly are focused on their long-term supply. I think it really depends on how such a JV is formed. An early stage company can really benefit from the expertise, of course, in a larger company. The other thing that investors can assume when a bigger company comes in is that it's a vindication of the quality of the project, because there'll be a large technical team that has reviewed that project, whereas most early stage companies, of course, are a CEO and a VPX, or maybe just one of those, maybe a geologist. So they're smaller teams, and we as early stage companies have to swing for the fences a bit, of course. Bigger companies don't have to do that. They really focus on what they want to do. They review those projects in great detail. So that is great, but then of course when you have a 10% partner in a project, they can only invest for 10%. So you always have to find your 90% from elsewhere. And that's the tricky part. That's when does it become worth it? So again, it's a complicated question with not a clear answer, I'd say.
Yeah, I think one of the dangers, when we're in sort of a less than ideal market, and the markets that we're in, it seems almost too good when you bring in a major partner who's taking a piece of the project. Because a junior can sometimes never recover from that if you've given up too much of the pie at a down market. Our preference would be to bring in somebody at a strategic investment into the company and work with us to help fund and move the project forward, and that kind of gives more protection to our shareholders. And we're starting to see more interest in that. I know a few years ago, if you'd gone to one of the majors and said, take a 10% investment in the company, not the project, they would have said no. But we're starting to see interest in that. And what we're starting to see as well is some of the majors look at smaller investments across a broad spectrum of companies. This sort of, we'll take a little bit of everybody type approach, and knowing at the end of the day, we can always buy out the ones that we want. And we haven't seen that for a while. So, the interest of both in the Yukon, and I know with some of the other juniors in the group that I'm part of, that we see from the majors, the willingness to cut that check for equity investment is very hopeful. So I think that's the way that we should go. JVs can work as well, but sometimes when your partner is so much bigger than you, it's hard to keep your eye on the ball with that.
Yeah, I've been in a few JVs, and I think it depends a lot on the project and where you're at with it, and the size of the project too. So, and also it's in the details of that agreement, which is a big piece to that. And for example, our Rackla Gold project, it's a very large project, and I think you need to be realistic about the size of the project and the ability of a junior to raise those funds. I mean, my dream, I think everybody wants to keep it 100%, but as cycles go through market conditions, big projects that need a lot of dollars, probably good to have a JV partner as long as you've got a good deal that's going to be good for the shareholders. So in the right space, I think JVs are good. But my preference is always to go 100% all the time, if possible.
Let's talk about project funneling here globally. As we can't continue on this base metal copper space. Just kind of being an observer, it does kind of seem like there is a little bit of a rush of the big companies going in and trying to lock in projects. Again, Rio Tinto looking at Casino was really interesting. It sounds like they're trying to lock up Oyu Tolgoi in Mongolia as quickly as can. BHP taking a big stake in Filo. There's not enough of these big type of projects to come online, and I'm just kind of curious if you potentially could start seeing a rush of those companies, like again taking a shotgun approach and trying to get anything they can on the books to feed their funnels for the years to come, if we are indeed in this, copper being the next fuel for the world.
Yeah, it's very inelastic supply, I think, is what, and it kind of takes on your introduction here, that supply doesn't come online right away. It can take years to, sometimes decades. So I think we're at the start of a process where we gradually going to see the copper price go up. The more desperate, if you will, we will become, and the tighter the market becomes. And of course, there's also a process ongoing right now where the supply chain is being kept domestic, which you see in, for example, the critical metals credit in Canada. So trying to build domestic projects, which is inherently inflationary compared to what happened over the past few decades, where we could always source everything from anywhere. And so, of course, as this happens, as the price increases, the majors will keep making more money and start building out their exploration teams, which they've been, they've probably reduced over the past decade or so. And with that comes more projects, et cetera. So I think you will see that increase in majors' activity in projects for sure, and it'll, hopefully it'll ramp up fairly quickly. But we'll see what the global markets do.
Yeah, I think, the big mining companies are inherently risk averse, right? The boards do not allow them to go out and take on risky projects. They prefer to take on de-risk projects. They let the junior sector, 1 in 1,000 projects are going to become a mine, so that means 1 in 1,000 companies are going to be successful, and the rest are not going to be as successful, even though you can sell a project before you get it over the finish line. But that risk aversion that the majors have means they need a junior sector, and sometimes they'll forget about us for a while, and then as they start to make money and they start to look how are they going to put the pounds back on their books. Acquisition is one of their best ways to do it, because we've de-risked the projects for them.
I think my only comment to this is that we just got back from London, and we had a lot of meetings with investors and corporates, and with us shifting over a little bit more to copper, some of our existing relationships, we're seeing a lot of interest in copper from corporates as well. And it's maybe not investing or doing that 10% investment into it. It's just a lot of companies are outreaching to build those relationships and looking at your project. Doesn't mean that they're going to, say yes to a financing anytime soon, but they want to do the background work to learn about your project. So when you do get results, they have that rapport and they understand the project. So I'm seeing a lot of that right now.
Again, if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and we'll get to them as much as you can, as quickly as we can. We only have about 5 minutes left here. Let's go and talk about, other than money, what does a company such as your three need right now? I mean, we've had such interesting last couple years. Supply chains have been tough. Labor has been very tight. But other than money, what do the three of you need for this season?
Well, if there's any way that we could erase the past 2 years in COVID and forget that it ever happened and start out as if that never happened, that would be great. No, I joke, but that was a major impact on our exploration. I mean, in 2020, we didn't know, and there was a lot of companies in the Yukon didn't know if we're going to be able to work. And then we kind of figured it out. We kind of figured out how we could work. and we didn't start drilling until October. Until it took us that long to sort of figure it out. And then by the time we started drilling, there was no drills available. So this chaos of there is no work, then there's lots of work, then there's no work, then there's lots of work. So, it's something that, yeah, if you had a magic pen, you could a magic wand and you could wave it. Consistency of the crews that you need to do the work, and consistency even across government would be a big help. But that's it's a little bit pie in the sky.
I think we all know it. I think labor was a big thing. We've typically had our crews year after year. This is one of the first years we've had to go out and hire someone. I think we had 20 applicants, and then when we went back to a couple of them, they had already found jobs, so that was very challenging. So I think the labor and good talent is a thing. But I will say one thing that we did get recently is the mineral tax, the credits from the federal government. I think that's huge. Like, you're seeing some of these premiums that companies are getting. I know it's going back to money, but it's great. These premiums that we can get to help raise funds for critical metals, copper, and other metals. That's going to be very good for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would also add that aside from the money of that credit, I think it's important that we are seeing support again from the higher levels of government for the mineral industry in aggregate, because for a long time when commodity prices were low, you wouldn't hear that much about it. And now with, and then maybe this is the silver lining of the pandemic, but the fact that commodity prices are high again and it's on the radar of the federal government again, both the supply chains as well as the tax revenue they make from running mines. I think getting support from higher levels of government is important for us, because that it does trickle down to, the people that see us working our projects and nearby. And, yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's a good conversation. Thanks for taking all the hard questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.